Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the AFTN Soccer Show. There's still time, broadcasting live on YouTube. And this is also our podcast recording for episode 415. Thank you so much if you stayed with us on YouTube. We've had a few technical issues tonight. Zoom totally crashed on me earlier on. But delighted to introduce a Fab Four. We're going to look at a lot of Whitecaps and MLS chat. So, introducing my usual co-host, Steve Pander. How are you doing tonight, Steve?
Not too bad. Nice and rested.
Joining us all the way from Seattle. I thought finally we might be able to get him on the show and laugh at him because the Sounders lost. But no, not able to do that yet. Welcome from Radio Cascadia, Stephen Agen.
So glad to be back, Michael. Great to see you.
And welcome to the lady who asks diabetic footballers what their favourite candy bar is. It's Harjeet Johal.
Hello! Nice to see everyone.
And bravely wearing a New England Patriots hat after my team thumped your team on Sunday. And now we're going to beat Stephen's team, I'm sure, next time out as well. I was going to wear a 49ers thing tonight, but instead I've chosen to wear my East Fife tartan top. Available for £45 from the East Fife shop. Lovely. I recommend it highly. And also another fun thing arrived in the mail for me today. You may remember me going on about Faroe Islands football. Well, I got my Vikinger badge. I ordered this via a seller in Russia. So it's a Faroe Island badge from Russia to Canada. That's the kind of international show we are here at AFTN.
You realize the coincidence that you ordered something from Russia and now your computer wasn't working later on once it arrived.
Wow. Yes. Is this a bug? Is it actually a badge? Who can say? Maybe I should get rid of the packaging ASAP. But we do have a lot to chat to you about tonight. 2 Whitecaps games. We're going to look at how the MLS West is shaping up and just some general MLS chat in particular. But we'll kick things off by saying this is recording episode 415 of the podcast as well. It's definitely worth listening to the podcast version as well. Otherwise, you won't get to hear the wonderful music I've selected this week, which is from a concept album all about Genghis Khan and Mongolia. And I mean, that's surely worth a listen. I can see Stephen is getting excited by the thought of that already, so we'll make sure he gets that. But we are going to kick things off talking Whitecaps for the first few parts. Before we delve into tonight's game against the Sounders, though, I want to take us back 3 days to the win against San Jose. It was looking bleak at half-time, 1-0 down, and then everything came good in the second half. Ali Adnan scored a beautiful free kick. Tosin Ricketts got a clutch winner. All of a sudden, the gloom is lifted. The Whitecaps' playoff hopes are back on the table, perhaps. Before we get into the Seattle game, let's just look at the San Jose game. I will just get your thoughts on what you made of that. We'll start with Steve. What did you make of that game against the Earthquakes?
Well, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it could be the first time they came back from being down at halftime. Or am I wrong on that? I'm not sure. But it was an excellent
second time this season.
It was the second time. I did not expect them to come back in this game. It seems like that they don't have that in them. We've talked about it many times before. When they go down a goal, it seems like the momentum is out, the wind is out of their sails, whatever remark you want to use. But they came back. I think the Ali Adnan goal probably got them boosted up. It's something that came out of nowhere. And then Ricketts with that excellent, and that's something we've talked about many times over the years. Get somebody on the back post. You never know when the ball's going to get there. There's the number of players that Wondolowski's probably made a killing at being in the right spot at the right time, and Ricketts is that type of player.
He has,
yeah. But against for Ricketts, he's kind of that kind of player that will go to the net basically and pick up stuff and just slot goals in from 2 inches away.
Har, what did you make of that game on Saturday? I know you were excited to be watching it.
I was thrilled to be watching it. I think Marc Dos Santos' halftime talk, it must have been some hell of a talk because, the Whitecaps came out in the second half with a purpose. They were really buzzing around the San Jose net. You could tell how important that half was to at least tie a goal and then go get a winning goal. And so they really bunkered down and worked hard. I really think San Jose didn't pressure too much in the second half, and the Whitecaps really took it to them. So from that standpoint, it was quite a big win for the team, almost a must-win going into that game as we are joined by Chewbacca.
Yeah, it said Chewbacca is waiting to join, and I was like, will I let this person in? Is it Chewbacca or is it a tribute to Stephen Agen? Let's bring in the Seattle Chewbacca though just now. That beard is looking really, really fuller in the last couple of weeks since we've seen you. Is this your playoff beard? Have you started it early? Or are you just not going to shave until the Sounders are no longer MLS Cup champions?
Ooh, that might be a while. No, it's a lockdown beard. It's got, I have to find some way to pass the time, measure the time, and frankly, I don't have a reason to shave it until that stops, right? And so I'm committed to lockdown, but I've got to find some way to measure it. As far as the Whitecaps against San Jose go, man, I thought that sure was a gutsy second half and timely for once, with a real moment of quality from Ali Adnan. But to get the goal right after the break, really a great spot for momentum, and what a big performance in the most important match of the year at the time.
And Chewy, what did you make of that game on Saturday? I don't think I could have put it better myself. And that sounds very similar, I think, to what MDS's halftime team chat would have been. A couple of things I just want to talk about from that San Jose game. The goal that was given up, and I asked MDS about this in the pre-game chat on Monday. It was another ball over the heads of a defender. The fullback pulled more into the middle of the pitch. Unmarked guy at the back slots it home. Now, MDS said he felt this was a bit different to the other goals that have been given up. It looked exactly the same to all the other goals that had been given up to me, Har.
Yeah, I don't know if they practiced that play 500 times, 600 times, or 700 times, but we keep seeing it. It's almost like deja vu. And I think I said to you that it looked like Nowinski was having to cover two players on that play, which is tough just to cover one guy. I think maybe Ranko's caught out a little bit. If Jake goes to one guy, the ball could have gone to the other guy. So I think maybe it's just familiarity, playing with Ranko and trying to get some sort of sense of where he's going to be, where Jake needs to be. And then also the cross that came in was, wonderful, right on the money. So all in all, it was not a good goal, bad coverage, great cross. And, San Jose, thankfully, that was the only goal they got.
But it always seems like that whenever this happens, it's always Jake's original man that scores the goal and not the person that whoever he's covering for scores. It always seems to be, I know you're not saying it's the same goal, but it's got a very good streamlined resemblance to all the other goals.
Yeah, it definitely was. There was a lot of blame to go around for that one. I don't want to delve too much more really into that game. When I mentioned that we weren't doing a show after that one and we're going to wait and do one on Tuesday, someone had tweeted going, "Oh yeah, great. Don't do the show where it's going to be all positive. Let's do the show where it's going to be all negative after a defeat." That's us, because there's no views, there's no clicks, there's no listens in positivity. Folks just want to hear us be really miserable. That's why we do a Whitecaps show. That's why I've started doing an East 5 podcast as well. Misery makes money. That's my hashtag, I think. Let's delve more into what's happened tonight. Now, that win over San Jose, there's no doubting that what that would have done for the morale, coming from behind, everything like that. I just think would have been a massive boost to the Whitecaps. You look at their last 4 fixtures, and there's 2 that were must-wins. That San Jose game, the LA Galaxy game. Sandwiched in between those, though, were the 2 tough Cascadia games, Seattle and Portland. Out of the 2 of those, Seattle was the game I just didn't fancy us taking anything from. We have not beat Seattle since April 2017. And the games haven't been close a lot. They haven't been close for much of this season. And, I mean, going into this, I didn't expect anything really to come out of it. I thought maybe a draw at best would be good. When you saw the lineups for tonight, and I'll start with Stephen on this, were you surprised at the lineup that Vancouver put out? Or did you think this might be a game that they might rest some guys coming so soon after that game against San Jose?
I was surprised. I thought that we would see at least one of Cavallini or Montero start. It's hard to fault Marc Dos Santos too much because I think the game plan worked really well for 45 minutes. The change in formation worked better than I thought it would for quite a while, better than I gave him credit for before kickoff. But that being said, he wasn't able to make changes after the break quickly enough to bring on an attacking threat before Seattle put the game out of reach again. And so we're still kind of in this limbo where Whitecaps never really have an attacking presence when the game's on the line.
And Har, I know we were having a little bit of a chat before the game. For those looking in as neutrals, or for those maybe that hadn't been on MDS's conference call on Monday, where he did mention that he was going to really mix the lineup up quite a bit, I'm sure it would have come as a surprise. It wasn't a lineup to a lot of people, I think, that would have screamed going for it. It certainly looked a defensive lineup.
It looked like a lineup kind of similar to what we saw when they played Chicago at MLS back, where you kind of play defensively, and in second half, if it's close, if it's scoreless, you bring on your big guns and you try to, go at them and get a result. The only difference is they're playing Seattle tonight, and so that's a bit risky. And for the most part, it worked for the first 45. MDS had a good plan, and Seattle was frustrated. But the longer you try and play defensively against a strong lineup like Seattle, it's dangerous because they only need one chance to score, and once they got that first goal, they got another one. They were buzzing around the net in the second half, so it was a little risky. I would maybe have brought on a Cava or a Freddie to start the second half to just kind of push forward a little bit more and maybe get some attacking threats. But all in all, it was a good strategy, a good idea from MDS to start the game. 7 Canadians, so a lot of CanCon out there.
Now, Steve, MDS made a big deal before the game, and he spoke after the game tonight as well, about the fact that they were having to play their second game in 72 hours. The Sounders had an extra 2 days rest because they played on Thursday. There was no other way that this game could have been played this week because Portland are at home on Wednesday. If they had played the game on Thursday, then you'd have been playing the next game against Portland 3 days later. For me, this was the best I think we could have had, because I don't think we were going to get anything from it, no matter whether we had fresh legs, the full team out there, whatever. So just go for it now and give us this extra bit of time to refresh and recover for what is now an absolutely massive game against Portland on Sunday.
Yeah, I didn't expect much from this game, even before the lineup was given out. Seattle's had their number all this time, and the fact that you have, like you said, the 72-hour turnaround, that wasn't enough. So I agree that it was probably a game that you want to play for the draw. I think I brought it up on many shows before. This is similar to what Montreal put out against Vancouver years ago after the World Cup. It was like, I think it was 7 defenders and 3 midfielders and maybe 1 attacker, but it might have been 7 defenders and 7 defenders and 3 midfielders out for the outfield players. So you had to do something where I think this was a game where you wanted to keep the goal differential down as as low as possible, so you didn't become the worst in case it came to that, where goal differential came into play. This was one of those games.
I don't think goal differential is anything that the Whitecaps can salvage at this point. The thing that they've got going for them is the fact that they haven't got any draws.
Yeah, that's the one thing. And I think Steven said that a couple of weeks ago, where that could be their gimmick, where they just play the season without drawing a game.
Getting back to the game. Now, Stephen, was this not peak COVID MLS? Seattle travelling to play the home game against Vancouver in Portland. That's 2020 in a nutshell, really.
I just can't say it any better than that. And, it just, on the face of it, feels like the start of some type of weird soccer stress dream more than it does to an introduction to a real Major League Soccer game, right? But it is so weird. It's so odd to see the Whitecaps tarps in Providence Park and to see the navy blue projected on the seats of the stadium. It's just all wrong. Brian Schmetzer before the game talked a lot this week about how difficult he thinks it is, what a tough task it is for Whitecaps to live out of a hotel, play in somebody else's stadium, be away from their families during all of this, and I think you have to give them a lot of credit for the results that they have taken. Har, I think I saw your tweet earlier today. But before today, Whitecaps had been extremely good at Providence when they weren't playing Portland, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just,
they're still unbeaten if they don't have to play a Cascadian team.
There you go, right?
Just tweak that fact a little bit.
That was a fun fact right there.
I think that regardless of what happens for the rest of the season, that is something special. That record at Providence Park in that difficult circumstance, that's something to build some confidence in. Off of in the club, even if it doesn't translate to playoffs, even if it doesn't translate to trophy, it's a difficult circumstance where they came together and really succeeded, right?
I'm wondering if there's a correlate, like a comparison somewhere else in the world, another league, where you would see two rivals play in another rival's a home stadium.
I mean, the only time you've maybe had it was when Wembley wasn't getting used to host like cup finals and cup semi-finals, so you were playing games at different places around England. But
it probably happens in Champions League quite a bit. There might not be full rivals, but you got two top teams playing in another top team's stadium.
We're going to delve a little bit into that side of things just later on in the show as well, because I've got some audio that we'll play in the podcast just off MDS and Cava and Andy Rose talking about that they want to make this mean something. They don't want to be away from their family and going through all this for it to count for nothing. And I mean, they still are in the mix in the playoffs and everything like that. So we'll look at that as well. But it was a tough game. It was a pretty boring first half. Very little to talk about in that. It was the last minute, the 44th minute, really, before the Sounders started to put anything up, really, to kind of test the Whitecaps. Now, Stephen, we've spoken before, and speaking to Jackson as well, good friend of ours on the radio down there at KJR in Seattle, it's kind of known that Seattle struggle to break down teams that kind of bunker against them. But as Har was saying and as Steve were saying, there's only so much you can bunker against a team before eventually they seem to break it down. That first half, when it got to half-time, did you feel confident that it was going to be a repeat of a couple of weeks ago and they would just kind of find a different gear in that second half?
Relatively so. And, I think at the very worst, it looked like 0-0 was probably as bad as Seattle would come out of it. Schmetzer mentioned after the game that at the half, the main change they made was that they pushed Paulo and Svensson a line higher up, they pushed them beyond the attacking band of three for Vancouver, just pushed them advanced beyond that. And, he thought it really opened up the space in the passing channels for him. And so I was kind of struck by the idea that it took one tweak from Seattle at halftime to kind of break the game open. And it's unfortunate, I mentioned earlier with Cavallini and Montero, that MDS wasn't able to play, a similar card at half because, Seattle's not just going to sit on the game like that when it's not going their way. And so I thought, maybe that's the criticism, is that it was great for 45 minutes, great defensive plan, but then there has to be the idea for the evolution. What is Seattle going to do from here, and how are we going to counter it? And I think that maybe the idea there was a little bit weak.
That's a good point, because you can have all the plans in the world. MDS obviously had plans as to what he was going to do in the second half, but a lot of that depends on the opposition. And you had the best Seattle team out there against quite a weak depth side of the Whitecaps. I mean, at 0-0 at the half hour, it was a good performance up to that point. I know it's not exciting, and I know a lot of folk watching at home will be bored, but to me, it was perfect. It was perfectly executed. They'd got to 0-0. They'd frustrated Seattle. Did you think they could keep that going for 45 minutes, or did you expect it kind of to unravel the way it did?
I thought it would unravel, just because I've seen that episode before when they played Seattle at the beginning of the month, scoreless, 0-0 going into the second half, and then they scored 3 goals against the Whitecaps. So I kind of thought Seattle would kind of turn up and really, crank up the offense. The Whitecaps did have those guys coming in off the bench, so they had a chance, they had a shout to kind of keep it close. So from that standpoint, you kind of seen this movie before, kind of knew what was going to happen. So yeah, at least it was more exciting, more entertaining second half. VAR, I decided to show up, so that was familiar too.
And they did better. They only gave 2 goals up this time. Obviously, they didn't get one, but
for me, I would have thrown caution to the wind and just made 3 subs at halftime. And just because if Brian Schmetzer is going to make adjustments, why not make adjustments to his adjustments that you think he's going to make? I would have just done that because there was nothing to lose. If he was going to bring in those players in like at the 58th minute or whatever, anyways, or 60th minute, what's another 15 minutes if you're going to go for it, right? And you're going to have the advantage of Portland playing on Wednesday, so you get an extra day off in advance of what Portland's going to get too. So why not take a chance and see what you throw like basically catch Seattle off guard. There's nothing to lose at that point.
No, Schmetzer mentioned specifically that they planned for a different formation from the Whitecaps, specifically a back 4, and being able to kind of match up 2 forwards, pushing Morris high next to Rui Diaz and matching them up against the center backs, and that it really threw them off to have 3 center backs back there. I think that was the key. I think you mentioned it, Steve, is that but MDS managed to surprise Sounders for 45 minutes. And I think that would have been the cool thing, would have been another surprise at the break. So I am right there with you. I think halftime changes, something else to surprise Seattle, and a result was there.
Yeah, and when you're the team that's like been beaten around by Seattle for so long, you got to keep pulling up these surprises and catch them off guard. Do something that they don't expect. And I wish more football managers or coaches, whatever you want to say, do these kind of things instead of doing the typical wait till the 60th minute or wait till you get scored on and then make the substitutions. Do it beforehand. Catch them off guard.
Interesting. Chewy, what was your thoughts at halftime? Yeah.
Well, clearly he was surprised, but he expected what happened in the second half there.
Oh, do you speak whatever language Chewy speaks? Klingon?
A little bit here and there. I picked up a little bit here and there.
Yeah. That is a good time, I think, for us to take a little bit of a break if you're listening to this on the podcast. We're going to be back looking at the second half after we hear the first of tonight's songs about Genghis Khan. And we'll be back with that after this.
Hi, I'm Marc Dos Santos, and you're listening to the AFTN Soccer Show.
He was a Mongol chieftain. hordes of Mongols over the world, he would assert. Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan, King of Mongolia.
Welcome back to the AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio 101.9 FM, broadcasting from the unceded Musqueam territory at the University of beautiful British Columbia. And kicking off this part, it's not the final song from this month's Artist of the Month, Splodginess Abounds, because we've got something special lined up for you this show. And this is the whole reason that I picked Splodginess Abounds to be our Artist of the Month for October. This song you heard there was Genghis Khan, taken from the very rare 1999 cassette, Holidays in Mongolia. This was a 10-track album released by Splodginess Abounds lead singer Max Splodge, and it was a concept album all about Genghis Khan, the Mongols and Mongolia, painting a picture of the rampaging hordes from Genghis Khan's time being reinvented into modern day society, still living in their felt tents, but with their bowl haircuts, wearing plimsolls on their feet and eating bags of chips all the time. And ultimately, Genghis Khan rising from the dead to take over the world once again. Now you might think that is a strange kind of concept album, but it all stems from Max Splodge going for a DNA test in 1999 and being told that he was a direct descendant of Genghis Khan himself, inspiring him to write this album that was never actually released as a CD or a vinyl record, but some tracks from it did appear on Splodginess Abounds 2000 CD, I Don't Know. And we kicked things off there with Genghis Khan. There's 3 more crackers to come. I'm sure you can hardly wait. Shuey, you're a big fan of Mongolia, I'm sure. They live in felt tents. That seems right up your alley. He sounds in distress there. And another kind of animal that sounded in distress were the Whitecaps in that second half, especially in the first 15 minutes. For those that don't know, this was Raul Rudy Diaz's first game back for the Sounders. He had been away playing for Peru, caught COVID off Paddington Bear, shouldn't have shared those marmalade sandwiches, so he'd been in quarantine. I think the Whitecaps defenders thought he was still in quarantine, Stephen, because the social distancing they gave him on that goal was like gigantic. And ball came in from Nuhu. Rui Diaz finishes it, flag goes up, offside, we all breathed a sigh of relief. They played the replay and it's like, yeah, he's not offside. MDS is adamant that it should not have been overturned. He said to him it was not clear and obvious. I think it was. What did you think?
I think you can definitely make the argument. I see where MDS is coming from, that it's not clear and obvious. It's a very tight call. There are people who want to see the decision on the field stand as it's made when it's really tight, right? For me, I feel like this whole offside thing, what's going on in the EPL, whatever discussion we're having about it here, I feel like it's really pretty simple. Where I feel like the law, I'm not certain, but I think the laws of the game mention that you have to derive an advantage from being offside, right? Mm-hmm. And I just wonder if you're looking at whether somebody is, 1 pixel offside on the screen compared to the defender, how can a person possibly derive an advantage from that, right? And so I think that the margins that people get down to analyzing today in terms of the offside decision, I think it's silly. I think it's unless the play actually came down to a micrometer in terms of who got to the ball first or something like that, we should just look at it in terms of, did you derive an advantage by being in front of the last man? And in this case, I don't think that Rui Diaz is clearly in front of the ball. For me, it's even. I think it's right to give the goal. But I can definitely see why MDS would feel aggrieved. So sorry if my tangent about EPL tangents is not
Well, at least we don't have
topic.
that stupid line, because that's what's ruining it. Because you
Yeah.
are talking about a pixel. That's basically what it comes down to, Steve.
And the thing is there was a game, obviously the game earlier, Montreal and I think what they playing
Nashville.
Columbus? No, Nashville. They're playing Nashville. Same colors. Nashville. They're playing Nashville, and there was a goal late that Quinto scored, and it was called offside. And I felt it was more onside than the Rui Diaz goal. It was actually felt more onside, and they didn't even review it. It didn't even go to review. So it's odd to me, like where, like I agree that if it was called offside on that play, it probably wasn't enough evidence there to overturn it. It should have left it as is in that case. In the Quinto goal, I thought that was enough evidence that should have been reviewed. It should have been given a goal to Montreal. And you know me, I'm not willing to give goals to Montreal that easily. So it's odd the way that, and again, this comes to the thing where I think you need a central location where you have a few people and you're not rotating people in and out of opinions of what's offside and what's onside. It should be very one way to do it.
He was ahead, like when the ball was played out wide to Nuhu, I think he was offside there, but of course this is then second phase, you can argue. I know Manuel Veth says it doesn't matter if it's clear or obvious, it's either offside or not offside. What are your thoughts on it?
It was really hard to say, but I kind of think that, if you're going to call it offside, it needs to be 100%, the other way if you're going to reverse it. And I don't know if that was clear enough to overturn it. So, I guess
Or
it kind of,
obvious.
yeah. So I kind of have to agree with Marc Dos Santos on that. I'm just reading the quote sheet now. There's a lot of quotes.
I think people are misunderstanding what clear and obvious means. I think clear and obvious doesn't mean that it's whether it's offside or not. Clear and obvious means that is there a clear and obvious mistake in what was called on the field, and should it be reviewed? Not if it was clear and obvious offside. That's not what clear and obvious means. It's whether it should be reviewed or not.
I guess just my general take on it is, and this is broader than just the moment in tonight's match, is that, if it's too close to call, I'd like to see it go to the attacker, and most certainly I'd like to see him keep the flag down and review it afterwards and let the play out, right? So for me, I'd like to see that play given as a goal, just in general as a soccer fan, but I'd like to see it given, against anybody else as well. So,
although I agree that with it fully. It should always, if you want to get more people interested in the game, you got to give it a little bit more of an advantage to the attacking side, because as we know, everybody complains, soccer's a 1-0 game or 1-1 or something. There's no harm in having extra goals in there.
Well, no, I mean, up to that point, it hadn't been very exciting. But then it's like things kind of went off the rails a little bit in the second half after that goal. I mean, Chewy, first of all, was that offside for you? 1-0 Seattle, 54 minutes. 6 minutes later, it's 2-0. Rui Diaz has another hand in the goal. Ladero finishes it off. A lovely curling finish, Stephen. And Rui Diaz just skinned Ranko, just kind of left him in his wake. Great cutback, but that finish from Ladero, that is the quality that the Whitecaps lack most of the time. Cavallini's got it in him, but most of the time, that link-up play, I think that's what we would love Cava and Freddie Montero to be, but what Ladero and Rui Diaz have just seems on a different level.
They sure have executed it against the Whitecaps in the last few years, and have earned results with it. That being said, I think that right after the first goal on 54 minutes, you can kind of see the game change, and it's complete. That there's so much space. Sounders look rampant. Frankly, Whitecaps kind of look like they have their heads on fire a little bit, and it's just there's no real plan for how Whitecaps are going to get a foothold in the game, gain an attacking presence, and keep Seattle from just tearing them apart at the other end. And frankly, it wasn't the first chance that they scored on after the first one that they got, right? I mean, they had a couple of chances just in those 6 minutes. And so I thought there was a little bit of inevitability about the second one, whereas the first one was the game. Can Whitecaps sit in? That was the proposition MDS set up. Can Whitecaps sit in and keep Seattle out? And they did a great job of that for as long as they did it. But once that proposition fell apart, I mean, man, it after the first goal, to me, it didn't look like it was going to be a competitive game from there, unfortunately. And sure enough,
No.
it only took 6 minutes.
Well, I mean, it kind of felt like a training match after they went to 2-0. That last half hour, Seattle... Well, I was going to say it was easy for them. The last 10 minutes, it wasn't that easy. I mean, the Caps really turned it on in that last 10 minutes. They had a couple of chances. Ali Adnan had another free kick that was past the post. Dahomey went down in the box, which I've seen them given. I'm not sure it was a penalty. There was definite contact. The Seattle defender won the ball first, and then Dahomey kind of hit him. I mean, how did you see the last 10 minutes, and what did you make of that Dahomey incident?
Yeah, the Whitecaps had a few chances to get maybe a goal back and make it closer, or even try and make it 2 goals there. The Dahomey play was interesting. I don't know why it didn't at least go to VAR. I thought that should have been something that happened. Cavallini had a half bicycle kick attempt that was a great effort, and Ali Adnan had another long distance shot on target, but it went wide. So they had a few chances, and I think, as I said earlier, maybe if they had brought on these big guys at the start of the second half, maybe they would have created more opportunities or had more scoring chances. So you're playing with fire if you're going to wait and then bring them on later, because then Seattle's already up ahead, and then you got to push forward without getting caught on the counter. So it was really a mix. They had some chances, but it was just a bit too late for them to try and, get a result. So it's much ado about nothing.
I mean, the Dahomey incident would have been reviewed because they do quickly look at that. It just must have been deemed that it wasn't, a clear and obvious one. I mean, Stephen, did you think it was a penalty?
First off, I did see on Twitter that there was a brief VAR check for it and that they determined no penalty. I saw an angle on local Seattle television, on the local Seattle broadcast, that was, for me, definitive and clear that he won the ball, and that Arriaga won the ball, and it was a clean challenge. And to me, it's just that simple. Honestly, I've seen a good angle of it.
I don't think it was a penalty. Steve?
Yeah, but I think the Dahomey histrionics that he's done so far this season has probably played into it. What I'd like to see is them to bring some players in and ask them not to dive for at least half a season, so that they could build a reputation of not diving, and then so when they need the goals, then they could dive or do something else, and they'll know that this guy doesn't have a reputation. They need to spread it out a little bit better.
So diving tactics for the team.
Yeah.
I mean, the dark arts can work and benefit you, but once you get a reputation, especially in this league, it's a reputation that doesn't shift from you. We've seen it with Teixeira, we saw it with Fernandez before that. It's a tough one. I don't mind it sometimes. It is a blight in the game, I know, but
you got to pick your spots. You can't do it in the middle of the 50-yard touchline or something like that, where you're going to be diving at that point. You got to pick your spots where you're gonna dive and where you're not.
I had a good chat with Kristen Knowles during the Forge CONCACAF League game a week or so ago. Time means nothing anymore. I can't remember when that even was. And we were talking about the dark arts at the end, and it feels like Canadian teams and Canadian players have finally learned to do that on the international stage, and I think we've needed to do it in CONCACAF because other countries are doing it. Other teams from other countries are doing it. I think that's an aspect of the game I would have been good at. Crap at the rest of football, but I think me and dark arts are made for each other. But if other teams are doing it and getting away with it, fair enough. But once you've got VAR, you can't expect to get away with stuff like that. I mean, it's just stupidity. Anyway, that's our chat about the game. We're going to delve into some of the YouTube chat and then some other MLS things in a bit. For those of you listening on the podcast, I'm going to bring you some post-game audio now from both head coaches. We're going to hear from Marc Dos Santos, but first of all, we're going to hear from Seattle Sounders head coach Brian Schmetzer. So let's hear now from the Gaffers.
It's obviously a big moment for the club. I think I'd like to even push that back. Even the USL days and NASL days, this club has always been a winning club. It's something that is within the DNA, the culture of our club. I reminded the players before the game about the great players that we've had at this club and what does it take to make it to the playoffs, and other sports franchises, and how, and asking them questions so that they can reflect on the job that they do. What I would come back with, Maz, is that the reason why we've been in the playoffs for 12 straight years, obviously Ziggy laid a great foundation, very grateful for that. But the reason why this club has made it 12 years in a row is because the players always are committed to themselves. They're committed to their teammates. They're committed to the fans. And it's that type of culture that can drive, that can be successful, that can win championships. If the players come collectively and they believe in themselves, that is the strongest version of a team. And so that's what we have with the Sounders. That's what we have with this particular group. I've noticed it even back in Orlando in the bubble. Even when things are tough, that group, they stick together. And so I'm awfully, awfully proud of this particular version of the Sounders. And I'm awfully proud of the club for the success that we've had in getting in the playoffs for 12 years.
And then just to follow up, in this game, both goals came from defenders passing the ball forward. I know there must have been some messaging about people running, but what does that say about that back line and the ability to look downfield and hit that runner?
Well, look, we have been, all credit to Jimmy Traore. We have had Nuhu take 10 balls after each practice, crossing balls, different spots on the field, his crossing references. The kid played well in the second half. Kudos to him. And then the other balls, the other things that we talk about, we're a fast switch team, we're a transition team. So the ability for us to, whenever the ball turns over or whenever there's an opportunity, if the opponent is playing a high line like Vancouver did tonight, we always like to try and turn our opponents. And so I would credit both goals, not just to the back four, but I would say that's how we are. That's how we are as a team. That's what we do.
No, I thought in the first half, we had a really young squad and guys that came on. And although we didn't generate offensively, we were sometimes flashes of danger in behind using Theo, but of course not enough. I think our defensive organization was spot on. We were able to frustrate them, not giving them space, bring the game to where I wanted the game to go. Unfortunately, when we start the second half early, they get that goal that, in my opinion, it needs to be clear and obvious to turn it to overturn it. I'm not sure it's clear and obvious. I just saw the images. But overall, their possession and their weapons made it hard on us. When we conceded that goal, we changed tactically. We took more risks. We came back with some of the subs that we thought we would do them around the 60th. But then you give Seattle what they want. Seattle is a team that wants to play in transition and the mistakes of the opponent. And then they get that goal that I thought we had to defend it better. Unfortunately, Rui Diaz does a very good play on Ranko. We could have controlled that better. And then they get the 2-0. We tried after. We tried our best to press, to push, to create. I think it's a penalty shot on Dajome. But again, I think Seattle deserved the win. We knew it would be hard for us tonight based on all the circumstances, but I think there's positive things because of playing so many young guys against an opponent that have on the field the MLS Cup, a winning team, and even a little bit improved because of Gomez being there. I support 1,000% our players. I they have all my support. I'm proud of their work. I'm proud of what they had to do almost 60 hours after we have a tough game against San Jose that was demanding. So now what I told them is let's go, let's move on. What's next is Portland. We'll have everybody recovered, everybody healthy, everybody being able to play the game, and we'll be ready to go.
Can you talk a little bit about the decisions you had to make in putting together your starting 11 tonight? Obviously, not much time between games, so did you want to rest some guys knowing that you're playing Portland this weekend as well?
No, it's not what I wanted. It's what I had to do. Some of the guys were very tight in their muscles. Some were risking injury. Some of them were not able to recover on time to play this game. So I spoke about it, I think, in the 48 hours prior to this game. I don't think we were playing in the same ground when it comes to recovery. I'm very frustrated that this game had to be played in a schedule like that. I spoke about that a lot before the game, and we had to make changes. Unfortunately, we had to rotate a lot, but the positive of that is that we saw a lot of guys that give the good answer, that push, that tried to help the team. And again, I'm proud of the effort of the guys tonight. It was very demanding and very hard for them to play again today. It would have been different if we play this game tomorrow.
He's the gaffer. You can't try it on with him. He's the gaffer. Even when he's on a limb. He's the gaffer. When his back's against the wall. Has the answer to it all. He's the gaffer.
One good thing about Brian Schmetzer is this is kind of our Halloween show as well. That's why Chewbacca has joined us. And for me, Brian Schmetzer is always in costume, Stephen, as Mr. Garrison from South Park.
Brilliant shout. Very nice, Michael. I love it.
Once you see that, you'll know. Next time you see him or you're in a call with him, you will just hear Mr. Garrison. Okay.
Does he have a Mr. Hat?
There's a question for Stephen to ask the next time, because as everyone knows, Brian Schmetzer is so jovial in his press conferences. He loves that kind of banter. Always good for a laugh is old Brian Schmetzer.
Somebody should, like, on next April Fool's, leave like a Mr. Hat puppet or something on his, like, the press conference table or something like that, just as passing by.
Actually, talking of Brian Schmetzer, I was having a discussion with a Seattle journalist, and I said to him, have you noticed every time Brian Schmetzer has a press conference, he's always writing things down in his notebook? I take it you've noticed that, Stephen. Do you know what he writes? Do you know what it is? Do you know what he's writing?
I think he takes notes on the game. Oftentimes he's got the stat sheet from the match in front of him, and that's what he's looking at. And when journalists will reference one of the stats on the page, he'll frequently circle it, make note of it. I think that oftentimes what he's trying to do is he's trying to organize his thoughts just for what he's trying to say to the press. He wants to be sure to single out the guys who he thinks played well, on and on. He gets a fair deal of softballs, but he really likes to make sure that he works in what he thinks to be the appropriate praise for his side. He's really a player first manager, and I don't mean that in like a cliche way like everybody else's. I mean that he'll tell you to the detriment of everything else that the Sounders are the relationship between the players and the fans, and that everything else is extraneous. He actually it was really odd. You talk about asking him questions, jovial press conference. He is a very jovial guy. You can have great banter with him during press conferences. Someone asked him about his 400th match in charge of the Sounders the other day, as he hit 400 as the manager between USL and MLS. And he got really set off about it. Like he got really ticked, like he wouldn't answer it. And he did not want to talk about himself. The players had won that night. The Seattle Sounders had won that night. His team had worked hard. The players had worked hard. And he just was not interested in having anybody take the focus, take the message away from the players on the field who won the game. And so I don't know if that's instructive or illuminating or anything, but I thought that was interesting. At first, I thought it was kind of an abrasive answer. But when you read into it more, I think it's just he's really focused on that. He's really focused on the Sounders belong to the players.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's excellent. And I thought that was what he was writing down as well, like stats or just trying to get his thoughts in order. Now, the journalist I was speaking to swears, and I'm not making this up, he swears that he saw the notebook and all that's in it is doodles. He's not writing anything. He's just like doodling away. So somebody needs to get a swatch at his notebook and see.
Yeah, but
exactly
maybe he has a writing like a doctor where only he can read what he's
writing.
writing.
Yeah, it could be shorthand. There was a BBC comedy show called The First Team. That if no one's seen it, try and check it out. It's really funny. So there was an old Italian manager, and he always had his notebook, and he was in the show. He's like known for writing it. And then one of the players finds it one day, and he opens it up, and what's inside it is a Sudoku book, and that's what he's been writing constantly in it. So it could be that that's what Brian Schmetzer's doing. Whatever it's doing, he's working, so I can't really knock it. Let's get to some of the YouTube chat now. We normally have Zach that reads these out, but unfortunately Zach couldn't make it tonight. I guess Chewy could have had an attempt, but I don't think that would have been very good. This is the first me checking the chat during the show. Oh boy, this is a lot of chat. Okay, first of all, Naveed Masinchi is congratulating me for my friend's win tonight, and he's sure that they missed having me in the locker room. I was disappointed not to be there. It's like I miss seeing Stephen Fry's donut tattoos, to be totally honest with you. I mean, Stephen, have you seen Stephen Fry half naked and checked out his tattoos? Sight to behold.
That there's some very physically imposing Sounders. Of all of them, I would have to say Roman Torres is probably the most imposing I have seen in the locker room. Although Ymar is purported to be even larger in the chest and bicep than Torres.
Oh, there's me with Stefan. Thanks to her. Look at those tats, man. Norberto's says, quite rightly, again, we see the quality difference between Seattle and Vancouver. Rui Diaz and Ladero, the difference makers once again. I mean, you can't argue with that at all. They have difference makers that the Whitecaps just don't have on a consistent enough basis. And I think that's a big problem with the team, Steve.
Yeah, it's the Ladero factor. I think he's the big. Like, I know Rui Diaz scores a lot of goals, but you have a guy like Ladero who can drive the play through the midfield, and I think that's essentially what the Whitecaps are missing. We've said a number of times. Even Chewbacca will agree that we need a number 10.
We'll get to some more chat and some Halloween chat, though, in the next part of the podcast, which, for those of you listening on the podcast, is going to be coming up after this.
Hi, I'm Lucas Cavallini. You're listening to the AFTN Soccer Show.
There's moguls on the streets of London. There's moguls in this town. The return of the Mongol armies. The reincarnate of Genghis Khan. They march to the white Eurasia, shedding blood and fear. You should have seen it coming. It took 800 years. Mongols in your clubs, Mongols in your pubs, Mongols in your tent, Mongols in your bed, Mongols in your cars, Mongols in the bars, Mongols everywhere. There's Mongols on the streets of London. We've been waiting for them to arrive. They're setting up their buildings all over Mega Drive. Genghis Khan and Eric have all risen from the dead. So you better buy them all a drink or they chop off your fucking head. Mongols in your clubs, Mongols in your pubs, Mongols in your jet, Mongols in your bed, Mongols in your cars, Mongols in the bars, Mongols everywhere.
Welcome back to the AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio 101.9 FM. And kicking off this part, it's the second of tonight's Splodginess Abounds Mongolian-themed songs. This one didn't actually appear in the original Holidays in Mongolia cassette and was just released in the later CD, I don't know. Not sure why, but there you go. It's a cracking song, and we'll be back with two more Splodginess Abounds Mongolian-themed tracks later in the show. But let us get back talking football now, back talking Whitecaps, MLS. So, I put a question out on Twitter asking for what costumes Whitecaps players could dress up as, or people in the Whitecaps organisation. So Naveed, who we were just reading the chat there, had actually tweeted that nothing is going to beat Jeff Anderson dressed up as the Riddler, as we talked about in an earlier show. Just before I get to some of the answers we've got, anyone jumps out at any of you? Any Whitecaps players, what should their costumes be? I mean, Har, you were asking Halloween questions to Andy Rose. Any costume that you would like to see a Whitecaps player dressed up in?
Yeah, that went well yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really big on Halloweens and costumes. I say just be yourself.
Oh, what would you dress up as?
I wouldn't. I would just be me.
Oh, that's scary enough, to be honest. Stephen, what's your go-to Halloween costume?
I've got the football-related one. I go with the blind ref. It works every time.
Chewbacca, what do you like to dress up as? I hear you like to dress up as Zach Meisenheimer. No? He's too hairy for you. Yeah. Steve, what's your go-to Halloween costume, and what would you see some of the Whitecaps dressed up as?
I don't really have a go-to. I usually do something different every year. But if I were to pick a Halloween costume for a Whitecap player, I would probably pick a Greg Louganis outfit for Christian Jahome.
Ah, that's going back to before when Stephen was born as well. Of course, it is my wedding anniversary on Halloween, so we like to celebrate it every year. It's going to be a little bit different this year, but I always like to put the willies up, Caitlin, for our Halloween anniversary, so I'll try and do something for that for her this year. Getting to some of the notifications that we had on Twitter about this. So, yeah, Wigs Digitalism says that Freddie Montero is like Joffrey when he gets subbed off, because he's not a happy guy when he gets subbed off. Kevbo, Real Kevbo, says he'd like to see the whole team dressed as the 1979 NASL Soccer Bowl winning Whitecaps, because he's never been able to cheer for a winner since. That's not true. They did win all the CSL titles in the early 90s, so I mean, there was that. Mama Rabes says Captain Jack Sparrow for Russell Tiber. I think that's a good one. Rod Hodkinson says Max Crepeau should dress as a Fairmont Hotel, because you just come to expect clean sheets.
How about David Milinkovic as the Invisible Man?
Oh, yeah, well, he is sick at the moment, so
okay.
We don't know exactly what.
No, I'm talking about sometimes when he's on the pitch.
Oh, yeah, he does disappear.
Yeah.
Navaneeth Ravichandran said every defensive player should dress up as blocks of cheese because they're full of holes. And the last one we'll read, Walter Sue, Waterboy99 Troop, says the easy one would be to dress the team up as a competent team. I guess I kind of asked for those answers when I was doing it. But we'll get into some more of the YouTube chat now, because we've got some more questions to kind of delve into. Now, Alberto says that he honestly thinks Robbo's counter-attack strategy against Seattle was more dangerous than what MDS did tonight. Teixeira, Reina, Mosqueda, they'd have kept Seattle busier than Cavallini alone with Montero. What do you think of that, Steve?
Yeah, there are good points to that. My only thing is that I will go back to that Seattle game, the 2-game series, where they really didn't give he didn't give himself a chance to win at all. So that kind of muddies everything that he did against Seattle. But I think definitely at that time we were much more competitive with Seattle, so that probably did work.
The Walker said that Rui Diaz was offside when the ball was played through, but behind the ball when passed. In their opinion, that's the same as the shot that was saved but tapped in by the player in the offside position a game or two ago. I can definitely see that as well. And the last one we'll take from the chat just now, ILCS says, can you discuss the negative goal differential over the course of the season, as well as the very low goal score in total? Looking at the stats, the Whitecaps have scored 24 goals this year, which, quick glance, is second worst in the West. Dallas have 22, Galaxy have 22, so I guess technically third worst in the West. Their goals against is 43 compared to San Jose's 45, so they're sitting on minus 19 goal difference, which is worst by far in the league. Now, or not the league, but the Western Conference. The defensive play, we touched on it in the first part there, and if we look at it again tonight, it's tough to see who the best defence is out there. Har, if we're going for a back four, who would you like to see as that back four for these last two games for the Whitecaps?
Cornelius, Derek Cornelius. He needs to be starting at center back next to Godoy, Jake Nowitzki at right back, Ellie Adnan at left. I think that's the back four. That's the best. I know they paid €1 million to get Ranko in. I just don't think he's good enough to be starting on a consistent basis. This was DC's first start since the last game against Seattle. I was pretty good. I thought he was solid. He was aggressive when he needed to be. His positioning was, pretty good considering the 2 goals in the second half. So I think DC needs to be starting. I know he's been waiting patiently. I asked him about, how tough it's been to, not get practice time and, not being able to play regularly. So, he's really worked hard, and I think he should be getting more of an opportunity in the back line. And I think Eric Godoy and him are the best partnership back there at the center back position.
Steve, what about you? Who would be your center back pairing?
No, I think I agree with that. Cornelius and good. I would go with Godoy or Rankovic, whichever one you want to go for, whichever. But I think Cornelius has been, I think there's been a couple of games where he was in the lineup where they let in a lot of goals, but they weren't necessarily his fault, some of those goals. But overall, they've always seemed to be those tight games. He's always the consistent person in there, or the consistent person in the lineup. So I think that he has deserved to be the starter. I think they still want to kind of showcase Ranko because I do feel like he's going to be in bomb where he's going to be brought in and quickly turned around for a profit.
Stephen, watching from afar as the kind of neutral in this, you've seen some good defensive performances. You've seen some horrific defensive performances. Against Seattle, it's not been great for the Whitecaps. Who strikes you as being the two best centre-backs for the Whitecaps?
I don't feel like I've seen enough of Ranko to have a fully formed opinion on his long-term future in Vancouver. I think I'm absolutely with you guys that right now, for the most important games of the season coming up, it's Cornelius and Godoy who should be starting. I don't know. I think sometimes it's tough to judge a guy on his first year in MLS at all, and then particularly this season with things so badly impacted by a million different things for the Whitecaps. It feels like it's hard to judge a big acquisition like that too harshly just yet.
The thing for me with Ranko is I like when he's bombing forward with the ball and he looks dangerous. He's a good ball playing centre back. That's not what the Whitecaps are needing just now. They basically just need a guy that's a stopper, that's there and can get rid of the danger and just deal with what a centre-back is meant to do. And for me, Cornelius brings that a lot more to the team. Peter Galindo from Sportsnet, I don't know if anyone saw this on Twitter, but he was putting together a number of different charts for players, Canadian players and Canadian teams throughout MLS. So he was doing requests as well. So I asked him to do a comparison of 4 centre-backs, throwing Andy Rose into the mix as well. And it was really interesting because analysing it, to me, Godoy and Cornelius are your 2 best centre-backs based on those stats. And I don't think that is what we're going to see in these last 2 games. I think MDS likes the pairing of Ranko and Godoy, but I think we're going to be much better having Cornelius and Godoy. And as Steve touched on there has been some mistakes this year that I think have been pinned on Cornelius, and I don't think that's fair because there's been a lot of blame to go around on the goals.
And the thing is, you're right about the whole thing right now about the center backs. I know you want to play Ranko because he can handle the ball, he can move the ball forward. But this point, because their midfield is too weak, you need to go with the marketing, the anagram where it says KISS, basically keep it simple, stupid. So just keep it simple at the back. Do not try to put people into positions where they're not going to be able to recover, and let them play defending game. And that's what Cornelius does. He plays a simple game. He gets the ball clear. He's in the right position at the right time, and he's not trying to do too much. And you got to do that right now because when they start bleeding goals, they really bleed goals a lot, which is why the goal differential is such a huge thing.
What about right back? Do we stick with Jake Nerwinski? Do we have Bikel there? Do you move Godoy to right back and have a Ranko, Cornelius centre-back pair in her? Or is that just too much to risk at this point of the season?
I believe I already said Nerwinski should be at right back.
I know you like Jake.
I think Jake is good, but I think the thing is what you got to get into his head that is to stay in his lane as well. Don't overcompensate for somebody else's mistake, because that back post is really they're giving up a lot of goals at that back post, and they need to cover that more than in the middle.
He's brought some more offensive flair this season. You know, he's got 2 goals. He's getting forward more. He's hustling all around the pitch on the right side. But I think maybe his defensive game has struggled a little bit. I know the opposition sides like Jordan Morris, they're really targeting his side of the field. So, you know, there's still that balance you need to have going forward and also defending. But I think having, you know, Ranko in there and bringing in Godoy and just mixing the center backs, I think that's been challenging not only for, you know, the fullbacks on the team, but also the goalies. So I think more familiarity, I think maybe that will settle. But yeah, I think Nerwinski's a solid option at right back. And he's, you know, he's second longest tenured on the senior team. So he has familiarity with the league, with the opponents, and some of the guys on the team.
I threw that question out on Twitter, and I shared the charts that Peter had come up with just to kind of see what the fans were kind of looking for. So I'll read you some of these comments. 604 Boy said, Godoy and Ranko. In his opinion, Ranko has a future in Europe, like Steve mentioned, and the Caps would do themselves a favour by developing him. Couch Ultras say Godoy and Cornelius 100%. Greg Petrie, Godoy and Veselinovic. Cornelius would be the one he would want in, if not Veselinovic. Ubik Wintermute did say Godoy and Cornelius, but we need to also balance Ranko in there so we can make a tidy profit off him in the future. He has loads of potential. I don't, like, I get that, but for me, that's not a reason to play the guy just so you can develop him to sell him on. You want your best players in there, and I think Cornelius has done enough to earn that. He was out of favour in the MLS's back tournament for whatever reason, but when he came in, he kind of looked good. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if Cornelius actually hangs around here next season or if he maybe looks to move on. Do you guys think that Cornelius will still be with the Whitecaps next year?
It's all depending on what MDS wants. First of all, if MDS is going to be here, because like we said, he likes a guy like that can handle the ball, and Cornelius isn't that type of player, but he's definitely got value with another style. If he does move on, he'll definitely be signed somewhere else, whether it's MLS or he maybe goes back to Europe.
Well, yeah, I mean, Everyday Mister said he wants Godoy and Ranko because Ranko's young and needs playing time to develop. And I do get that you're only going to develop by getting playing time, which I guess actually kind of brings us on to the midfield a little bit higher. If you're going for a midfield pairing for these last 2 games, do you go with Bikel and Jingles? Do you have Baldy in there? Do you put Tybert in there?
Yeah, I'd like to have Baldy in there, but, you know, he's only 20 years old, and I know, you know, he's kind of looked at the next top midfielder, the future midfielder of this team, but he's still young, and I don't think the coaching staff is fully comfortable with pulling him out there for, you know, the next 90 minutes each and every game. So with that being said, I'd go with Jingles and Bikel, and then Rusty Tybert on that left side. You know, he has been pretty solid on the left side, and Rusty's been filling in for Ali Adnan when he gets up the field. So I think that's kind of set, and then Dahomey on the other side, and Cava and Freddie as the 2 strikers. I think kind of that's the set starting 11 we're going to see in the next 2 games. The question mark, I think, is the center backs. As I said, Cornelius, I think he should be starting, but I think MDS may revert back to the Godoy and Ranko. So we'll have to see. But, yeah, the midfield's been solid. And so, yeah, I don't know what he's going to do, Marc Dos Santos, but he'll probably go with the winning lineup that we've seen the last few games.
Steve, who would be your 2?
If you're going to go with my choice of Cornelius and Godoy, then you're going to have somebody that can push the ball up. And I think Baldy is the only one of those midfielders that can do that. I think Peter did something on Baldissimo too, and he
Yeah.
was clear and away the most like all around midfielder.
Yeah, he looked at other fielders as well, and Baldy stood out by a mile. It's maybe a lot to throw him into two big games, though. I don't know.
Yeah, but why not? What do you have to lose? Why not get this guy
Playoff
into
place.
those kind? Oh, come on, man! I just want to see these guys get better, and because even if you get in the playoffs, how long is that going to last?
Well, yeah,
Like,
we'll come to that soon. Yeah,
that's going to last until the national anthem, the playoffs, basically. Once the national anthem is over, the game's over. But I think that you got to put him in, because I'm not even saying for the future that he's the best player. I'm saying the present right now. He's one of the top 3 midfielders, because there's not very much to differentiate. And the one thing he does well is get the ball up the field. And you need to, if your midfield can't do it along the deck, you might as well get that up in the air and switch play and get it to your wide areas and all that stuff to maybe create some attack.
Stephen, I don't know if you've got a chance to really see much of Baldissimo apart from the games really against Seattle. What have you made from any highlights and stuff you've seen of him, or just the midfielders in general? Is there any midfielders that you've thought, I don't want them playing against Seattle because they're going to cause issues?
I mean, frankly, no on the latter question. On the former, though, I think Baldissimo looks like a promising guy. I mean, I naturally have not seen him to the extent that you folks have. But that being said, he looks like a good partner for Tybert. Like he has a little bit of an attacking intent, ability to distribute the ball beyond what maybe some of the other Whitecap center mids I've seen have been able to do. But I think, you bring up a good point. I think Steve brought up a good point. It's tough to hand over the keys to center midfield to a 20-year-old, right? That's a tough thing to do. But also a good point. If there's nobody clearly better, if he's the best guy, should definitely play him. Mm-hmm. I think, maybe going back to the point earlier about should Ranko play because you want to sell him on eventually, right? I mean, that's not a great reason to play a guy, but playing Baldissimo because he has time to develop and because he's the best guy for the position right now, well, that checks multiple boxes.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's it for our chat, really, about the game and the couple of games that's coming up. For those of you listening on the podcast, you're really lucky because it's time for this week's Wavelength. So as regular listeners will know, I like to play my punk songs in Wavelength, but they're not all punk, and this week I've decided to take it down a little bit, go a little bit mellow, and we're going back to 2010 for this week's song by an English singer-songwriter called Matt Fischel. This was a song that was released as a single in 2010 and also featured on his debut album released in 2013 called Not Thinking Straight. It's a song sung from the perspective of a young gay schoolboy with a crush on the straight captain of the school's football team. The lyrics tell of a relationship between the two boys, but it is ambiguous as to whether or not the relationship is real or imagined in the narrator's mind. Intrigued? Well, let's hear it now. This is Matt Fischel and Football Song.
I'm sitting on the back of the football bus. All the lads are wearing shorts and shin pads, talking about the game they're gonna win this afternoon. And all this display of masculinity, well, it's making me feel a bit nauseous. So I close my eyes and I pray it'll be over soon. Now I have never functioned well at a competitive sport. I just can't find the fun. And besides, I'm far too paranoid about the way I look when I run. So I simply comb in my hair, trying my hardest not to stare. But it's getting cold now. Then the
So Matt Fischel there with Football Song. Something a little bit different for you in this week's Wavelength. I hope you enjoyed that. But we're going to be back talking football and back with our final song from this week's Genghis Khan and Mongolian themed album. And we'll be back with all of that after this.
Hi, I'm Toussaint Ricketts, and you're listening to the AFTN Soccer Show.
Hello there in Mongolia, I'd really like to know ya. Sometimes you seem a million miles away. Today, all the nomads in the Gobi and Genghis and his cronies, I wonder what you're doing there today. Something's happening, but it's not happening here. My mind turns to a land so far away, a place so full of history and stories full of mystery. I wonder what you're doing there today.
Welcome back to the AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio 101.9 FM. And kicking off this part, we've taken the mood down a little. Hope it hasn't put you to sleep. That was Max Splodge, Splodginess Abounds, with track 5 from their Holidays in Mongolia's cassette. That was Lullaby of Mongolia. But let's get back talking football now. We've not got too much more that we're going to delve into. I'm going to play some audio of Marc Dos Santos, Lucas Cavallini and Andy Rose just talking about they want this season to mean something. They don't want to be away from their families, giving up so much, going through all this, and then basically feel it's all been for nothing. So I'll bring you that audio just now, and then we'll have a little bit of a chat about it.
Is there right now. Now it's something that is showing up a little bit, and it's becoming a little bit more difficult for some of the guys. But every time we're in training and every time we're in games, we forget that and we're able to move on.
You touched on the mental side a little bit earlier as well, and a couple of weeks ago, something that you said kind of really stuck in my head, that you want to make sure that everyone connected with the club, you're not doing these sacrifices for nothing. You're not being away from your families for nothing. Is that like a strong message that you're going to focus on over these next 4 games? That, look, you've given up a lot to do this. Let's make sure that they definitely count.
Yeah, it's the major message that we have between us is if we're going through all of this, we have to try to make it count. And for us, making it count is step 1. Can we be in the top 8 in our division and be in the playoffs? So we're very focused and everybody wants it. There's this side that is really hard about this year because when you think about going to MLS's back in Orlando and where we are now, it seems like all year, if you put the preseason in in San Diego and Portland, we feel this year didn't exist. We feel that we've been away all the time and we haven't been home and always at an hotel. So the amount of sacrifices that everybody has put in brings us to think that this only makes sense if we make it count. It only makes sense if we make something big out of this, and we hope that we're going to be able to achieve something. That's our objective.
Marc talked about wanting to make sure that this season meant something for all the sacrifices that you guys have kind of given up and being away from family and loved ones. And he said that's basically going to be the main message now going into these 4 games. How much would it hurt if you went through all this and there was nothing to show at the end of it?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean, all this time away from home, the sacrifices we're making, we have to make the best out of it. I don't want to go home with empty hands. I want to go home to my family with something, something that really, showed what everything meant for me, and obviously my teammates as well. So that's going to depend on us, and depends on how badly we want it.
I'm a dad, and I can't imagine what you guys are going through. What is that feeling like when you walk through the door and see your kids and your wife for the first time in so long? And then what is it like to have to leave them again after such a short period?
I mean, it's when I walk in that door, it's like lifting up the trophy, you know what I mean? But I want that same feeling here in the club. I mean, we have two families. We have the one at home and our family here. So I want that same feeling I get when I arrive to my house. Obviously, for the short period of time we're at home, the goodbyes are tough. The time goes by fast, and you spend as much time as you can. But 2 days is not enough. But at least we get to see them. It's been hard, but at the end of the day, we gotta make it worth something.
Last week we spoke to Marc and we spoke to Cava just about wanting this season to mean something, that you're not away from your home, you're not away from your families for nothing. Just to get your kind of take on that, it's like having been home when the team's allowed to go home and then getting away, just how difficult it is just to see your family fleetingly, and how much you want to make this season actually count for something.
I completely echo their statements. It's when we all look back on this year, we want to be proud of the way we handled every situation, everything that's been thrown at us. I think as a club, we've had to really persevere through an awful lot this season, in terms of when you go back to the beginning, and when you go back all the way to the beginning, really, with coming off a great win down in LA, and then having such a long break, and the players that couldn't go to the MLS back tournament, and then immediately reintegrating and having to go on a really tough road trip to Toronto and Montreal. There's been an awful lot for us to persevere through as a group, and to come out where we are now with a lot more wins than many of our counterparts in where we are in the standings, I think is a testament to the mentality, to the coaches for keeping everybody going. And without a doubt, we want to be able to go back to our families when all is said and done, and be very proud of what we did as individuals and as a group. That's the most important thing. There's coming to the business end of the season now, where everything counts. We've put ourselves in a good position with these last few games to go. And just to get above that line, to push on through, to make the playoffs, it's the most important thing to everybody. And then we can, take it from there. At that point, anything can happen. So the biggest thing still, another thing I've tried to reiterate to guys, is to just go one day at a time right now, and certainly one game at a time. Try not to look too far ahead. It's so easy to start calculating points, but all the teams we're fighting with, the fact that they have to play against each other, when you start looking too deep into that, it can take your focus away from the task at hand. And right now for us, that's a game tomorrow against one of the best teams in the conference, a team, like you said, we've lost to twice this season, and we need to respond to that. So I think we're all just looking forward to continuing what we've been doing these last few weeks, and get back on the pitch.
So Marc Dos Santos, Lucas Cavallini and Andy Rose there, just talking about wanting this season to mean something. And it's tough. It's tough for everyone involved with the team right now. Being stuck in a hotel, as Stephen mentioned, Brian Schmetzer mentioning how difficult it is. They want it to actually count for something. And I think that's one of the biggest motivations going for the team in these last two games. Yeah, they want a playoff spot. And once you're in the playoffs, realistically, anything can happen. I don't think we're good enough to compete with the best teams in the West, let alone all of MLS. Getting to the playoffs seems like it would be a massive achievement. And for what the guys have gone through, I'm not trying to really downplay and say, oh, it's like winning the MLS Cup, but it's a big achievement. If they can get that far, this is massive to them. It's going to feel worthwhile.
I think inside the Whitecaps locker room and the organization, it's going to be a massive achievement, like you said, for them to accomplish that. You know, considering having to play in the United States, having to travel the day of games when they're on the road, you know, the COVID situation and all the players that are missing in Orlando. So from that standpoint, it would be huge for the organization, for the confidence of the players. It would be a massive achievement to be able to play in the playoffs, even if it's just maybe one game against, you know, a top team like Seattle. You know, they're all fighting to make the playoffs. And this 2020, we've had all these curveballs in sports. And so it would be monumental if they made the playoffs. I don't give them a big chance if they get in. I'm still skeptical that they will make the playoffs right now. So we'll have to see what happens. But that's what they're fighting for. And if they've got the determination to do that, then, you know, they could be in with a shout. You know, they're still in a playoff spot right now. The other teams have a few games in hand. So we'll see how close it gets. And, you know, if there's a tie on points, you know, they have the breaker with most wins.
Yeah.
They've got 8, so they've got that too. And so we'll see what happens, but it could happen for sure, and it would be a great boon to the team.
And the thing is, the one thing is you know that they will be, you know, if you can recall the MLS back tournament, I think it was Chicago was their third game. And when they won that, they were super, like, they were right into it. That's what they wanted to do. They almost collapsed on the field, a lot of them. They were celebrating like they had won the MLS tournament already, even though they just advanced to the next round. So you know that that's what they want. So I have no doubt that that's what their goal is. And if they get there, they'll see it as a huge accomplishment.
Stephen, looking in from afar and knowing what the Whitecaps are going through, hearing like Brian Schmetzer talking about it, a lot of fans around the league haven't really fully understood what the Canadian teams are having to go through just now. Do you feel that's fair to say? Do you think it is known that they're not getting to go home because they're having to stay in another country for every single game for basically like 2 months?
I don't think that type of thing gets brought up much. And I think, you know, probably a lot of the more unpleasant sides of soccer during COVID get glossed over by fans and journalists who are happy for the distraction. And, you know, I don't think I've been on the right side of this all the time, but I think I've probably come off a little bit cynical compared to some others when it comes to just playing soccer at all. You know, maybe this wasn't the best year for it. Maybe everybody should be home with their families, right?
I'm happy to call this season now and just bring it to an end.
And so I don't think that people have given adequate, simply put, I don't think people have given adequate attention to just how difficult it is for Vancouver. And it also might be one of those things where unless you're experiencing it and living it, it might be tough to really understand it.
I mean, the mental toughness is, I can't imagine being away from your family for that long. And like the audio that's played in the podcast, JJ Adams had asked Cava, because they go home when they've got a chance because they're allowed to fly in by charter, out by charter. They've got 2 days at home with their family. So JJ had asked Cava, what's it like when you go in and your kids come up to you? But then what's it like when you've got to leave again 2 days later? And Mark's talked about you're starting to see that hitting the players now, and it's starting to play a little bit on them mentally. And I mean, it's taken its toll. But even despite that, they want to get into the playoffs, knowing they'll be away from their family further, but they have to feel that they've done this for something.
And you just really feel like, I feel like that's you know, the idea that you come through something that difficult together as a group and have some success out of it and have something you can point to as a tangible result from it, like making the playoffs. That's something for that group to build off of. And maybe it's a mentality, Maybe it's keeping that, the core and trying to build off of it with strong acquisitions this offseason. But really, it seems like the foundation for a mentality for the team.
I was going to say, as the only person on the stream with kids, sometimes it's you feel like you want to be away from your families for a little bit. But I can totally understand that because I don't think Chewbacca had ever had kids. So I'm not sure if that's in the lore or not. But sometimes you just feel like you want to be. But I can understand, like, once you're away for like a week, then you do want to come back. So I can totally see that coming into play.
Did Chewbacca not have a wife and kids in the Christmas special?
I think that's been deleted from.
Let's ask Chewie. I think he's shagging a goat just now, so maybe no kids. Although goats do have kids. So there we go. Heard it straight from Chewbacca's mouth. It's certainly tough for the team, but we'll look at the standings. Right now, the Whitecaps are in a playoff position. They are sitting in 7th in the West with a points per game total of 1.14. Now, that, for all the teams in the playoff places in the West, is the worst. You look at the teams in the East, and it's surprisingly not the worst. 5 of the 10 places in the East have already been clinched, but Seattle's been the only team to have clinched a playoff spot in the West. So before we delve into what the rest of the season's kind of looking like, I got to ask Stephen. They've clinched their playoff berth now. They're pushing for first place in the West. What have you made of the Sounders season to this point?
I think they've had a very good year. Like we talked about last time I was on the show, I think they've put together probably their strongest squad so far in MLS this season. Maybe the biggest concern for them at the moment is just getting some guys a little bit of rest before playoffs. I think you can see the last few games, the attack hasn't been quite up to speed where it was before that. A little bit more difficulty playing between lines and creating chances against teams who are sitting in real deep. But that being said, I think if you can get Ladero a weekend off, get everybody on the same page going into the playoffs, I think they're going to be tough to beat. In particular, Nuhu, great assist tonight. If they can get him subbed out of there, get Jovan Jones or Brad Smith on in his place, I really don't see a hole in this lineup. And I think that certainly LAFC, Portland, somebody like that could beat them again, as they have, as they've dropped results in the last few weeks. But I'm feeling pretty confident about Seattle's chances headed into the Western Conference half of the playoffs.
Let's just finish the show off by having a look at the standings and what lies ahead in the coming weeks. Now, we chatted about this with Steve, so I want to get Har and Stephen's thoughts on this. So we'll get Har's first of all. Initially, they were not going to have a supporters' shield presented this year because it was an unbalanced schedule and everything like that. That decision has now been overridden, and they are going to present it. Which, surely, you're having a season. Why would you not present the Supporters' Shield?
Definitely think they should have awarded to the team that finishes top of the MLS table in the Supporters' Shield. I don't know why they wouldn't. I feel like the decision to kind of take that away was not a unanimously made decision. I think it was done hastily. I don't think everyone was on board. It shouldn't have taken TFC and Greg Vanny getting up in arms to reinstate it, and then the league getting involved, and then all these statements coming out from different groups. So, yeah, I'm glad they rectified it. They got it sorted. You're still having a season. You're still playing the games. It may be discombobulated, Canadian teams having to play in the States, but it's still a season. You wouldn't cancel the LA Dodgers winning the World Series because, it's a COVID, it's a different kind of season.
I would, because I'm a San Francisco Giants fan and I hate the Dodgers. But aside from that, I do get your point. What I thought was hilarious was the team, as you mentioned there, that had the biggest outrage about it was Toronto, the players, their management and their supporters. Then as soon as it's reinstated, they get hammered by Philadelphia and they're probably not going to win the Supporters' Shield now anyway. That was funny.
The TFC army at work again.
Yes. Stephen, what was your thoughts on it? When you heard initially that there wasn't going to be a Supporters' Shield awarded, we are still having a season. It baffles me that they'd come to that conclusion. The right decision's now been made, but just what's your take on it all?
Yeah, I actually come down on the other side of this one. I think that after MLS's back was over and the regionalized phase for what do they call it, phase 1 after that was announced, to me it looked pretty clear that we weren't going to have a normal enough season to award a regular season championship. Seattle, Vancouver, Portland, they're not even going to end up playing everybody in their own conference, let alone getting a chance to play everyone in the league. The Canadian clubs aren't going to get to play home games for everything after July, right? There was the period of time where the Canadian clubs were just playing each other over and over again, right? So, I mean, there have been some real oddities to it, but just once you got to regionalized play, to me, that was the point where a shield didn't make sense anymore. I think maybe the biggest mistake with it was not announcing it sooner, that they didn't want to award the trophy. I think that by waiting, that's probably what pissed people off, and I think that it would have been a lot more palatable to folks if they had done it sooner.
Yeah, I've no idea why they waited until like a couple of weeks before the end of the season.
And so that was strange. And then and I get why MLS wouldn't like this point, but just the last point to it for me is I just feel like it's a good thing for our competitions as a whole to be controlled by more people than just the MLS owners, right? Like, we shouldn't just give them control of all the trophies. I think it's good that, CSA, USSF run their own tournaments. I think it's good that this Independent Supporters Council has a hold of a different tournament and of the Supporter Shield. And I've certainly seen a lot of talk about self-entitled, self-righteous supporters getting in the way of the game, getting in the way of common sense, on and on. But for me, I think I thought this was a legitimate check and balance where it's supporters saying, hey, look, we probably shouldn't have even been playing it all this year, and we're certainly not having a normal season. And so we're gonna recognize that. We're going to pay respect to that by not awarding this trophy like it's a normal season. And to me, that decision made sense, but removed from that, having multiple groups of people make that decision and come to different conclusions is okay for me. And I get why MLS does not want supporters thumbing their nose at them saying, no, we're not going to give out a trophy. We don't think your year is legitimate, or whatever they infer from that. But anyways, I know you guys feel differently on it. I obviously get the other side of the coin where you did play a season. There is objectively a single table that you can line all the clubs up in, and there is one who's at the top. So,
well, the thing is, MLS has never been a even schedule.
Yes,
they've never. Yeah. But the thing is, if hindsight being 2020, it might have been ideal to hand the Supporter Shield to the MLS back tournament winners. Mm-hmm. Because considering they did it for the fans. And so I think that might have been the better thing, but I can totally see where you would say that it's not, shouldn't be awarded because of that. But again, it was the timing of it. They should have announced that way earlier because they knew this was going to be that type of season a lot earlier, like especially when that tournament came in. They knew there wasn't going to be a balanced schedule. People were going to be shifted in regions. So if you're going to do that at that time, then you should have adjusted it for, way back when.
So that's it for this part of the show. We will be back talking more standings and what this season run-in might look like. And we'll be back with all of that after this.
Hi, I'm Ryan Raposo, and you're listening to the AFTN Show.
800 years ago, Europe awoke to a terrible army which suddenly appeared out of the eastern mists. Very little was known about it. What was known was terrifying. It had already annihilated everything and everyone who dared stand in its path. These were the Mongols, the Tartars, the Devil's Horsemen.
Living a nomadic life, Mongol temples, Cavallini. These are the things that made the Mongols so great. Civil war, sacred steps, chopping off some Chinese eggs. These are the things that made the Mongols so great. My story's all from down here, I get them all in sense. I hope it tells the Genghis haven't gone over your heads. I suppose that all that I'm trying to say. So believe that Genghis will be coming back one day. Living life by the sword, punishing a sinful world. the films. These are the things that made the Mongols so great. My stories of Mongolia, I guess they will be said. I hope it tells the Genghis never gonna be a bit. I suppose that all that I'm trying to say. So be that Genghis will be coming back one day.
Welcome back to the final part of tonight's AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio 101.9 FM. And kicking off this part, it's the last of tonight's Mongolian-themed songs from Max Splodge and Splodginess Abounds. That was The Things That Made the Mongols Great. Hope you've enjoyed that weird and wonderful selection that I've brought you. If anyone is curious, some of the other tracks that were on the cassette: To Mongolia, Last Train to Mongolia, Go Be a Go-Go, Mongols in the Mist, Mongi Tonight, Holidays in Mongolia, and Mongol McGill. Maybe I'll bring you some of those in a future show. And I know some of you that know Splodginess Abounds were probably surprised that we didn't feature their all-time classic, 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps, please. How can you have them as Artist of the Month without playing that? Well, we did feature that song last month in one of our 3 of a Kind segments, so that's the main reason for that. Not sure what you made of those songs. I love them. I love the whole album. I just love weird and wonderful tracks like that. We're going to be back with a new Artist of the Month in next week's show. Who could it be? Find out soon. But we'll round things up now by just getting back to talking football. I'm going to play some audio now of Marc Dos Santos chatting about the playoff rules, which still have not been decided upon, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. So let's hear from MDS just now.
You know, I still don't have a clear indication on that, unfortunately. I don't want to say anything it's not clear right now. Our focus, JJ, right now is to finish above that line and at the same time win the most games possible that we can. And then, you know, if we could fight until the end to be in that top 8, that's what we want. So right now it's a little bit out of our control, the decision regarding that. You even had the league deciding a little bit later that there would not be a champion of supporter shield, and it's just a season where we're kind of putting band-aids into situation and moments, and it's been very challenging. But the importance is that there is an MLS season, and we're carrying on with everything that is happening. And our job is to try to win as much games as we can and be in a position that at the end we could be above that line. The ones we have a certain amount of points in our head that it's minimum need to try to finish in the top 8. You have to think that teams like Real Salt Lake, Galaxy, San Jose are going to all play between each other. They're going to have to take points away from each other also. So, you know, the amount of points that we're going to need, it's all going to depend on COVID, if there's new cases or not. It's going to depend on the results of the other teams battling with us. So there's still so much that could happen that we're just focused right now on the San Jose game. But what I think is the schedule has been very different for all the teams. If you think about 23 game schedule, 11 of our 23 games. So 11 is almost half of our games have been against the Supporters Shield champion, against the MLS Cup finalist, the other MLS Cup champion, the MLS is back champion. So we've had a very tough schedule where half of our games have been against 4 best teams in the league. So we think that it's just a weird way of going about things, where this year it's so unbalanced, everything, that the only thing we have to think about is who's our next opponent, what's our next game, and how can we win our next game.
Basically, what MDS is saying is he's kind of heard murmurs as to what's going to be used to decide this season, because we've got the big issue that as of right now, the Whitecaps have played 7 more games than Colorado. and we've got just over 2 weeks of the season left to go, and there's clearly no way that Colorado are going to play all their games. So looking at the standings just now, if they switch to points per game, which has been one of the rumoured things might have to be, the Whitecaps are screwed, because right now their points per game is 1.14. Colorado's sitting on 1.36, out of the playoff positions, second bottom in the West. What I don't understand, and we'll just get all your thoughts on this, we'll start off with Har. How can you be leaving it to just over 2 weeks of the season to go, and nobody knows yet what is going to decide these playoff places?
I don't think it can be points per game. To me, if they do it on points per game, I think it will be the biggest detriment to the competition's integrity since countdown clocks and 35-yard shootouts. It just simply isn't acceptable. You can't do it. You can't take away the opportunity for 3 points for the clubs who are supposed to play Colorado in those games. You can't do it. You can't say it's good enough for Seattle to give them 1.6 points times 2 for the 2 games they should play against Colorado. They've got an opportunity to take 6 points to get to the top of the conference there. And other clubs have completed their games against the Rapids and have had the opportunity to play them. And they're a very middling squad for top teams. That's a good opportunity for 3 points. The problem is that it doesn't look very nice to punish someone for getting COVID, right? Like it doesn't look nice to punish their team for that. But the reality is that's the bullshit situation MLS put us in playing this year. Now they're just afraid to go through with it, but you can't punish everybody else for that.
What they're doing in Scotland is they're looking to see if teams have followed protocols properly. And if they haven't, then they're just going to make them forfeit the games 3-0.
Yeah, and it's about, like, I think we spoke about it on the last podcast, and I think I muddled up the term, but it's about institutional control. And I know Stephen probably knows a little about this from the NCAA, that they'll always punish the entire program if a few people screw up, because they need to have the whole thing under control, and they knew the protocols that they needed to follow going into the season, and if they couldn't take care of it, then they should be. I know it's not fair to be punished for a disease, but it's essentially what everybody has to go through the same rules. And how come other teams were able to handle it and some teams weren't? Dallas and Nashville, they essentially got kicked out of their tournament, where they probably lost, they probably lost some money because of the fact that there was TV revenue that they probably lost out on, possibly. I don't know what the rules are there.
And just to be clear, I don't blame the Rapids for getting coronavirus repeatedly. Like I don't have any intel that this is because they're not following protocol or anything like that. I think it could just be luck of the draw, just bad luck that they get it. It's just that MLS has made the decision to have this season knowing full well that this could happen to one or more of their clubs. And so now I just don't know why we're going to go and get all sentimental about it now that it's happened and act like it's some big deal that Colorado's going to have to forfeit 7 or 8 soccer games. And that's just the only right answer.
Well, the thing is, as well,
I have a strong take on this one.
He's fired up.
I totally agree with you, because the thing is, realistically, this could be the situation for next year as well. The way that things are going, with the border not getting opened, the Canadian teams might have to play in the US again next year. MDS alluded to that on his call this week, that he kind of thinks that's happening. Tonight after the game, he said that basically everyone just wants the season finished as soon as possible, because there's a lot of worry as to what might happen in the US with coronavirus over the coming weeks and months. So, I mean, who knows what's happening there? Have you all heard what's happened with Minnesota and Colorado tomorrow regarding Kai Kamara? So apparently there was a gentleman's agreement that when Kamara went to Minnesota, he would not play against Colorado when the teams met, which of course they're now doing tomorrow. Colorado's back in action. So there's another bone thrown towards Colorado there. Stephen,
that's some shady business. Yeah. Some shady business.
No, but I've heard of that in other places too, like especially loan agreements. When I don't know if this was a loan or was it a
no, they just said it was a Adrian Heath said it was a gentleman's agreement.
But was it a full transfer, or was he loaned to Minnesota? It wasn't loaned to Minnesota.
Full transfer.
Yeah. So, but I've heard it in loans where the loan.
Loans is understandable.
But maybe if that was part of the deal, that was part of the deal. I don't see it as being that heinous. I do see it's kind of shady, but it's definitely not something I haven't heard of before.
Just to be clear, if Kamara sat out against all of his former clubs in MLS, the guy would never play again.
Yeah, there is that aspect of it as well.
But I think you can only do it for like a season. You can't do it for like multiple years.
Yeah. But I mean, looking at some of the games that's coming up, you've got Minnesota, Colorado on Wednesday. So, I mean, that's now massive. The Timbers play the Galaxy, which you think if the Timbers win, the Galaxy is going to probably be out the reckoning. But there's some big games coming up, like tomorrow. San Jose, Real Salt Lake. Huge implications there. Saturday, Dallas and Houston. Two teams again battling it in the playoff spot. So, I mean, that could have massive things there. So when you start to look at these teams playing each other, Colorado's got to play Seattle. If Colorado can get these games in, lose to Minnesota, lose to Seattle, all of a sudden their points per game thing starts to fall as well. Obviously, you need the Whitecaps to do the business, but yeah.
And Seattle, I think, is their only a home game. The other three are all away. So
Yes.
they're going to against tough opponents. So that's not going to be easy for Colorado.
Galaxy play RSL. San Jose play LAFC. So, I mean, that's a couple of tough things there. Dallas have to go to Nashville. So, there's a lot of teams round about the Whitecaps that could lose points here. And, I mean, Salt Lake have to play Sporting Kansas City and San Jose have to play Seattle in the last games of the season. So, I think there's hope for the Whitecaps. But I'll read some tweets out as to how the fans are feeling about it all just now. Carlos A. Norberto said, what's the magic number for the Caps that would mean they would miss the playoffs? Well, right now, it's just far too hard to say. You kind of have to feel they need to take something from their last two games, so at least 4 points, but ideally 6. I don't think 27 will be enough. Taff 1872 at Muffet Andrew Lee said, no chance, don't deserve to either. Greg Baxter says, please just let it end. I think that is a feeling a lot of folk have for this season just now, just in general, and of course for 2020. Ryan Burns at Authentic Me 13 said, a point I feel that deserves discussion is how MDS has, in my opinion, mismanaged his squad in the past few weeks and ridden 11 to 13 players to the point that he felt he needed to rotate so many in tonight, some into odd positions and into such a bus-part approach, and he feels that's what led to the loss tonight. What I would say about that, though, is when you looked at the fixtures, and even like going back a couple of weeks, I spoke to MDS on one of the calls about normally in the business end to the season, teams, managers, they want to go with consistency. They want to go with a set starting 11, really, that they do kind of ride into the ground. Now, obviously, this is a bit different because they're away from home. They're playing games a lot more regularly. I think if you looked at the fixtures that were coming up and you looked at what games you thought you could take points from and what games you thought you maybe couldn't take points from, this Seattle one stands out glaringly as one of the matches that I don't think we would have taken anything from. So I think it makes sense to try and ride them into the ground before this and then just rest this and kind of not throw this one away, but just go for a reduced lineup in the hope that you might grab something from it, but not expecting it. I don't know that you could say it's mismanagement, because I would have wanted the teams that were out for these last couple of games to have been the teams that got there. And on the whole, we've taken point from them. The Galaxy game didn't go, obviously, according to plan, but I think he has managed the squad actually quite well. Greg Ollison says, a win coming against Portland, leading to fittingly the tie to a woeful Galaxy to solidify our exit. That seems exactly what is due to come. Top of the box FC. Even if we did, it would only be for one match. This team isn't making a run. We will talk about that later in this part. Ryan Burns comes back and says, on whether they will make the post-season, my feeling is no, and also that they don't deserve to, and it is better if they don't. Too many in the squad aren't good enough. MDS has not coached well enough, and qualifying would, for some, also in the club, validate this season's poor effort. The Bad Wolf said, it's so difficult to stay in 8th place in the Western Conference. It is going to be tough, but we'll look at some of the fixtures that those in or around us have, because they are going to be playing each other. Bob Zoppi says, goal differential, second worst in the league. Goals for, tied for 4th in conference, with all other teams below or tied with less games played. Nothing makes me believe they will make the playoffs. I would say the big thing they've got in their favour is the fact that they have 8 wins and no draws, and the first differential is number of wins, so that is possibly a key thing there. Hopefully the goals then don't come into it. Peter Zimmerman, at XC Zimmy, said, playoffs are good for morale. We likely won't have a chance beyond the first round, but getting into the playoffs is really just a mental strength exercise from now on. Whoever wants it more will get it. It'll be fine. Panos Bilalakis said, how can the Sounders have their impact players constantly be in the right place to make the critical play? Yet the Caps impact players seem to be making the wrong decisions or kicking long balls that tend to go wayward. Such a contrast with each team. And we got Stephen's thoughts on that earlier, and it is a big, big difference. You look at teams like Seattle and some of the other teams in MLS, some of the top teams, and the Whitecaps just seem so far off the pace with that. Also doesn't really seem like something that can be fully addressed in the next couple of transfer windows or one season. So I think we are a couple of seasons away, if ever, of getting to that level. Seattle have just built things so well. They've got that continuity. They've got that consistency. They've just added so well to their squad and brought through the homegrowns that they've brought through as well, like Jordan Morris. Robin Bristow says, I'd like to see them get in, as it would be a good experience for the young guys. Will they? Not so sure. They needed at least a point from this game, he feels. I still go back to that Galaxy game, and I think that point that they lost there could be massive in the grand scheme of things. Carlos A. Norbertos comes in again and says, I'll agree with our journalist's comments on your show a while back. Close, but no cigar. Also, if they miraculously make the playoffs, do you really want to see them get blown up in the first round? Well, we'll come to that, but I do think just getting there is just a massive achievement. I know for some it's going to be like, well, it's just like a participation medal, but with everything they've gone through, it's just psychologically, it is just a massive thing. Going back to what Ryan Burns said earlier, I know some will use to validate that it's been a worthwhile season and a success, and it hasn't. I think you can have both. I think you can think it has been an achievement, but know that it hasn't been a great season as well. But we'll see what plays out. Oz Sweeney says, no, they won't make the playoffs. Been some nice positive signs slowly coming off late, but not nearly enough in more games than not. Missing the playoffs once again, mixed with mass season ticket holder cancellations, will hopefully finally be the kick in the ass the club needed years ago. But let's be honest, minimal change is coming. 604 boy RC says, why can't we have nice things like Seattle and Portland? Because frankly, our scouting in the past has been terrible. Sky Bueller, Sky Bueller 92, I'm pretty invested in finishing the season without a draw at this point. I am too. That would be fantastic. And as I said earlier, having that and having the wins we've got could really, really help us. I mean, we've got 8 wins now from 21 games, which is the same amount of wins that we had in all of last season from 34 games. Peter Seward, Shooter Dr. RD, says, a woeful season and another example of how much better the Sounders are compared to Tier 3 Caps. Some glimmers of hope against poor teams, but as soon as they play quality, they get found out. MDS has not done enough for me, and the club is still being as mismanaged as ever. Connor Turner, CT Overdrive, says, I'd say a 50-50 chance that they make it. Based on how they are playing, they probably at least need 1 win out of the last 2 games. If they win both, they're in for sure, he feels. I would say a win and a tie also gets them in, although the most caps ending to the season would be for them to make it, then have the Rapids replace them as MLS adjusts the standings to points per game, and then for San Jose to drop out due to a COVID infection, putting the Caps in last spot. And CD Pryor, I like this one, says, given the kind of year that it's been, the Whitecaps will not only make the playoffs, but will be poised to win before the season is abandoned due to post-election unrest in the US. This is 2020. I wouldn't rule anything out at this point. So thanks so much for everyone's tweets there. Sorry if there was any that I did miss out on. There was a lot coming through. But last thing I'll ask you guys, and then I'll let you go. We did this a couple of weeks ago, but let's do it again. We'll start with Har. Yay or nay, are the Whitecaps going to make the playoffs?
Well, I can't remember what I said last time when I was on your show. I probably said no, so I should probably stick with that. I will say no.
Stephen?
I am glad and frankly surprised, maybe even shocked to switch answers from my last appearance on the show and give an emphatic and resounding yes. I do believe the Whitecaps will make the playoffs, and I think they'll do it with a victory over LA Galaxy on decision day.
Steve?
I agree that I think they can make it. The next game is going to be huge. If they can pull out a result against Portland, then I think they got an excellent chance, because I don't think the Galaxy are coming to Portland are going to put that much of a effort into the last game.
Chewy? Oh, always the pessimist, Chewy, always the pessimist. I think if the Whitecaps win their last two games, they will do it. I don't think they'll beat Portland. I think they might get a point, and then it's going to be really tight. I think they need 6 to get in. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love them to get in just for everything that they've gone through. Once they get there, I don't see them going far. That is the other big issue. I think they're likely to be one and done, but you're down to cup football and then anything can happen. It just feels though, and this is the last thing we'll touch on, it feels hard that this is a team that just is not competitive with the top teams in the West right now.
They're just not consistent, you know. They beat LAFC, but then they lose to the Galaxy. They're in 2 tough games against the Sounders, but in the second half, Seattle just turns it on and, you know, takes control of the game. So they have some key players, some performances where they're strong for 45, maybe 60 minutes, but there's not just consistency where they can do that for a full 90 in a lot of games. And I know Mark doesn't like to use the consistency word, considering what they've had to go through this year.
That's so okay. The C word is allowed in this show.
No, it's not. And so, yeah, I don't think they'll make the playoffs. I remember last time I was on, I'd said they would only get 6 more points. Well, they already have 6 since I was on, so maybe they can get a few more points. They haven't drawn yet, so maybe if the teams around them can get a draw, it might help them.
Yeah, I hope we can go the whole season with no draws. I mean, that would be fantastic. Stephen, if they do make it to the playoffs, can you see them doing anything?
Darn, Michael, I was hoping that you'd ask me about getting there, because that was the rosier picture, because I think 27 I think 27 points is enough unless MLS screws them with points per game. But I really do. I think 27 will get them in, and that's just the result against Galaxy. But I think once you get into the playoffs, the neat thing about MLS is that maybe its greatest value to society beyond just our little group here is that it is such a great analog for the cold, random, chaotic nature of the universe, where just when you think you know exactly what's going to happen and that there's no chance that anything different could happen, the league tosses it on its head, essentially just to say screw you, and to let you know that you don't know as well as you think you do. And
it's kept it interesting this year for sure. It's twists and turns galore.
And so can I imagine a way right now that Vancouver upsets Seattle or Portland in the first round of the playoffs? No, frankly, I can't. But I also know that the beauty of MLS is that there's that 1 in 10,000 that'll just, try its hardest to pop up.
Colorado Rapids are probably going to win the whole thing now, by the looks of it anyway. Steve, if they get to the playoffs, will they do anything?
Well, I joked earlier that it'd be over at the Anthem, but I think Steven's right. I think anything can happen. But I don't see it happening. It's hard to I would definitely not put any money on it. So I definitely don't think there is much of a chance.
I'm going to bet your house on it, Steve.
Okay, cool.
I won't ask Chewy because we know what his answer is going to be.
Well,
But
he's been very pessimistic ever since his friend Han Solo died. So he doesn't look really at the bright side.
Spoiler!
Sorry.
When did he die?
Sorry about that. I thought you watched the movies.
Anyway, that is it for this episode of the show. Just before we go, let everyone know where they can find you online. Let's start with Har.
You can find my work at Equalizer Soccer, Daily Hive, and Pro Soccer when I'm not on the 4-low. I will actually have a story coming out tomorrow about a footballer.
Oh.
Crystal clear story, so you'll have to keep it locked to see.
Oh, I thought that was the name of the player. I thought it was one of the female ones, Crystal Clear. I thought I'd never heard of her.
No, it's Crystal Dunn.
Oh.
So you have to see. I talked to some of her North Carolina former teammates about the trade last week from North Carolina to Portland. So big deal. Talked to them today. This has been my third Zoom, so I'm glad that we're almost done. So you can check out my work tomorrow, Equalizer, Twitter, Hard Journalist. You know where to find me. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you for joining us, Har. Stephen, where can people find you online?
You can check out my podcast at radio_Cascadia on Twitter or at radiocascadiasoccer.com. And you can find me personally at Stephen_Agen on Twitter. Thank you so much for having me, Michael. It was so much fun doing this with you tonight.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Really appreciate both of you giving your time up tonight. I know it's really late now. Steve as well, thank you. I know you're a busy guy and you're working tomorrow, but where can people find you online?
On Twitter at Whitecaps Beat.
And Chewy, where can people find you online?
He's on all the social platforms at harrychewbacca.com.
Oh, talking of Hairy Chewbacca. No, we'll go off tangent if I start talking about Hairy Chewbacca. That was my nickname for my ex-girlfriend Claire as well. Anyway, I am Michael McCall. You can find me on Twitter at AFTN Canada. You can also read all our stuff away from the numbers, aftn.ca.
I think Chewbacca's having a seizure.
I know, it's like, I'm trying to keep a straight face here. And you can also follow us on this channel if you're watching on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, do the thumbs up, turn on notifications, smash the stuff. I think that's what the kids are saying these days anyway. But thank you everyone for watching. Thank you everyone for listening. Thanks all of you guys for joining. Go back to whatever galaxies you have all come from, and we'll talk again soon. Until then, thanks for listening. Take care. And mon the Caps. Bye, everybody.
Going to your first match is an experience you never forget. The atmosphere of what's going on around the pitch looks beautiful, and you always look and go, wow, I'd love to play here one day. If you get the bug, it's going to stay with you for life.
AFTN